March 15th, 1961, 10:30 at night. The double doors of the Copacabana Club swung open with a force that made the chandeliers tremble. 300 Italian eyes turned as one. A black man stood in the doorway, alone, unarmed, walking into the lion's den like he owned the place. Frank Costello sat on his throne of red velvet, cigar smoke curling around his face, his laugh dying mid-breath. The room fell silent. Not the comfortable silence of respect, the dangerous silence of disbelief. Bumpy Johnson stepped inside. His shoes clicked against the marble floor. Each step echoed like a countdown. 20 armed men lined the walls, hands drifting toward hidden weapons. But Bumpy's eyes never left Costello. Cold eyes. Eyes that had seen death so many times they'd made friends with it. He stopped 10 feet from the velvet throne. The air felt thick enough to cut. Someone in the back coughed. Someone else shifted weight from one foot to another. Bumpy spoke, his voice cutting through the silence like a blade through silk. "I came to collect the $100,000 from our agreement." The words hung in the air for exactly 3 heartbeats. Then Costello's laugh exploded, a deep rolling laugh that came from the belly. His 20 soldiers joined in. The Copacabana filled with the sound of Italian amusement. Costello wiped tears from his eyes. He slapped his knee. He looked at his men like they were witnessing the funniest thing that ever happened. Then he looked back at Bumpy, still smiling, still laughing, and said the words that would haunt him forever. "Agreement? What agreement, boy?" Bumpy didn't smile, didn't blink, didn't move. He just stood there perfectly still, and in that stillness was something more terrifying than any weapon. Frank Costello felt it. A cold finger of doubt traced its way down his spine. But he was surrounded by his men, in his club, in his city. So he kept smiling, kept playing his role, not knowing that the role had already been written, and he was just reading lines someone else had chosen for him. To understand that night, to truly grasp the madness of what happened in the Copacabana Club, you need to go back. 6 months earlier, autumn 1960. When the leaves were turning gold and the 5 families had a problem they didn't even know existed. They controlled drugs, gambling, prostitution, protection rackets across every inch of New York City, every inch except one, Harlem. And the man who ruled Harlem didn't ask permission, didn't pay tribute, didn't acknowledge that the Italian families even existed. His name was Ellsworth Raymond Johnson, but everyone called him Bumpy. The nickname came from a childhood illness that left bumps on his head, but nobody laughed about it anymore. Not after what he'd done to the last man who made a joke. Bumpy was 53 years old in 1960. He'd been shot 6 times, stabbed twice, arrested more than 40 times. He'd done hard time in Alcatraz. He'd survived tuberculosis. He'd outlived everyone who ever tried to kill him. And in Harlem, he wasn't just a crime boss. He was something closer to a king. Frank Costello understood power. He was born in Italy, came to New York as a child, worked his way up through the ranks of organized crime. He'd survived the Castellamarese War. He'd taken over the Luciano family when Lucky Luciano got deported. He had judges in his pocket, senators, police commissioners. He made millions every year. But there was one thing his money couldn't buy. One thing his connections couldn't give him, respect in Harlem, and that ate at him like cancer. September 1960. Costello called a meeting of the 5 families. They gathered in a warehouse near the docks, the smell of salt water and diesel fuel mixing with cigar smoke. The heads of the Gambino, Lucchese, Colombo, and Bonanno families sat around a scarred wooden table. Costello stood. He was wearing a $3,000 suit. His shoes cost more than most men made in a month, but his hands were shaking with rage when he slammed them down on the table. $2 million. We lost $2 million in Harlem last year. $2 million, that should be ours. And this Bumpy Johnson, this nobody from nowhere, he acts like we don't exist. Like our guns don't work in his neighborhood. Like our rules don't apply to him. Well, I'm tired of it. I'm tired of being disrespected by a man who should be shining our shoes. It's time we taught him a lesson. Carlo Gambino lit a Cuban cigar. He was a quiet man, Gambino, thoughtful. He didn't speak unless he had something worth saying. He took a long drag, let the smoke out slowly, and when he finally spoke, his voice was soft, almost gentle, which made his words more frightening. We've tried to kill him 3 times, Frank. 3 times. His men found out before we even got close. We tried to buy the politicians. He owns the same politicians. We tried intimidation. He sent our soldiers back in coffins. Expensive coffins, actually. Real brass handles, like he was making a point. So tell me, Frank, what's your brilliant plan? Costello's smile was pure venom. His gold tooth caught the light. We don't need to kill him, we need to destroy him. Make him come to us. Desperate, begging, on his knees like he should have been from the start. Then, when he's broken, when he's got nothing left, that's when we finish the job. That's when we take everything. Tommy Lucchese leaned forward. He ran a waste management empire that was really about controlling unions and construction. How do we do that? The man doesn't have obvious weaknesses. He doesn't use his own product, doesn't chase women, doesn't gamble, doesn't drink to excess. What do we hit? We hit what he loves. We hit his community. The room fell silent, because every man there understood what that meant. Bumpy Johnson protected Harlem like it was his own family. Every street vendor who couldn't afford protection money, every grandmother walking to church, every kid playing stickball in the street. He made sure they were safe, made sure the violence stayed away from civilians, made sure the crime that happened in Harlem only hurt people who chose that life. It was his code, his religion, and Costello was about to use that religion to crucify him. October 1960. It started small. A grocery store on 125th Street got robbed, not for money. The thieves just destroyed everything. Threw produce on the floor, smashed windows, terrified the owner's wife. The next week, an old woman got pushed down on her way to the market, broke her hip. Week after that, 3 kids got cornered after school by men in suits. Men who didn't take anything, just scared them, made them understand they weren't safe anymore. And when people went to the police did nothing, because the police were on the Mafia's payroll, had been for years. Bumpy knew exactly who was behind it. He sent a message to Costello through an intermediary. A simple message. Stop hurting my people or Harlem will respond. You won't like how we respond. The answer came back within 24 hours. A photograph. Bumpy's granddaughter, Ruth, 10 years old, standing outside her school, wearing her little blue dress and her backpack with the cartoon rabbit on it. On the back of the photo, someone had written 4 words in careful handwriting. Respond however you want. Bumpy Johnson didn't sleep for 3 days straight. His men wanted war. They wanted to hit back, hit hard. Marcus, his right-hand man for 15 years, slammed his fist on the desk so hard the lamp jumped. We can take out 5 of their soldiers for every one of ours. We know where they eat, where they sleep, where their families live. Let's end this. But Bumpy shook his head. His voice was quiet when he spoke. Tired. And how many kids in Harlem get caught in the crossfire, Marcus? How many stores burn down? How many innocent people die because we're fighting a war? No. There's another way. There's always another way. I just need to find it. So Bumpy started asking questions. He talked to bartenders and prostitutes, bookmakers and numbers runners, janitors who cleaned offices in downtown buildings. He paid for information. He traded favors. He collected pieces of a puzzle that most people didn't even know existed. And slowly, carefully, a picture started to form. Frank Costello had a weakness. Everyone did. You just had to know where to look. Costello gambled. Not for fun, not socially. He gambled because he needed to prove he was smarter than everyone else. And in September 1960, he'd made a massive bet against Sonny Liston in the heavyweight fight. He was so sure Liston would lose that he put down $200,000. Cash. But Liston didn't lose. Liston destroyed his opponent in 3 rounds, and suddenly Frank Costello owed $200,000 to bookmakers in Chicago. Chicago bookmakers who didn't care about his connections or his power in New York. They just wanted their money. More interesting than the debt itself was what Costello did about it. Nothing. He hid it. Didn't tell the other families, because if they knew he was weak financially, he'd lose status, lose respect, maybe even lose his position. So he juggled numbers, delayed payments, made promises. But Chicago was getting impatient, and that's when Bumpy Johnson smiled for the first time in weeks. A small smile, cold, like winter sun on ice. Weakness, he whispered to himself. Everybody's got one. A quick pause. In this incredible story of Bumpy Johnson, just to invite you, if you enjoy learning more about the American Mafia underworld, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any curiosities. Bumpy called his contact in Chicago, a man named Sal who ran the books for the outfit. How much does Costello owe you? Sal didn't hesitate. 200,000, and we want it soon. Guy keeps making excuses. Bumpy let the silence stretch for a moment. Then he said the words that would change everything. I'll buy the debt, $250,000, cash, guaranteed money. Today. Sal nearly dropped the phone. Guaranteed money was better than maybe money. Much better. Especially when maybe money came from a guy who was clearly struggling to pay. Deal. Send it over. Debt transfers to you immediately. And just like that, Bumpy Johnson owned Frank Costello's debt. But he didn't tell Costello. Not yet. Because the debt was just one piece. He needed more. Needed leverage that would make Costello understand he'd already lost before the fight even started. Bumpy discovered something else. Costello had a heroin shipment coming from Marseille in November. Big shipment. Half a ton of pure product, street value around $2 million. It was supposed to save him, make up for the gambling losses, get Chicago off his back, get the other families their cut. Costello had invested everything in that shipment, every dollar of credit he had left, every favor he was owed. It was his lifeline, his last chance, which meant it was the perfect target. Bumpy paid $50,000 to a customs inspector at the port of New York. Not for the man to steal the shipment. That would be too obvious. Instead, he paid him to whisper in the right ears. To make sure the Drug Enforcement Administration knew exactly where to look. Exactly when to look. And on November 12, 1960, federal agents raided a warehouse in Red Hook and seized half a ton of pure heroin. Biggest bust in New York history. The newspapers loved it. Photos of agents standing next to bags of white powder. The mayor gave a speech about fighting organized crime, and Frank Costello sat in his office and smashed everything within reach. Because in one afternoon he'd lost $2 million. Money he didn't have. Money he'd promised to people you don't break promises to. Now Costello was drowning. Chicago wanted their $200,000. The other families wanted their share of the heroin that didn't exist anymore. His suppliers in France wanted payment for the lost product. He was at least $700,000 in debt. Maybe more. His credit was destroyed, his reputation was crumbling, and he had no idea how to fix it. That's when he got the phone call. Anonymous. Male voice. Calm. If you want to solve your problems, be at Vesuvio restaurant tomorrow. Noon, come alone. Costello went. Of course he went. Desperate men make desperate choices. He sat at a back table. 2 bodyguards outside, gun in his shoulder holster, knife in his boot. He waited, checked his watch every 30 seconds. At 12:15, the door opened, and Bumpy Johnson walked in, 3-piece gray suit. Fedora tilted just right. He moved like he was walking into his own home. Sat down without being invited. Looked at Costello with those dead calm eyes and said 2 words. Hello, Frank. Costello's hand moved toward his gun. His bodyguards outside started to come in. But Bumpy raised one hand, calm, like he was stopping traffic. Before you do something permanently stupid, you should know I have 3 men with rifles in the windows across the street. You touch me, you don't leave here alive. Neither do your boys outside. So why don't we talk like the businessmen we pretend to be? Costello's jaw clenched so hard his teeth hurt, but he waved his bodyguards back, because the thing about Bumpy Johnson was simple. When he said he had rifles in windows, he had rifles in windows. The man didn't bluff, didn't exaggerate. He just stated facts, cold facts that you ignored at your own risk. You lost $500,000 in heroin last week. You owe $200,000 to Chicago. The 5 families want explanations you don't have. I did the math, Frank. You're $700,000 in the hole. Maybe more. In 3 months, you're either broke or dead. Probably both. Costello felt his skin go cold. How do you know about... I know everything, Frank. Everything. What you had for breakfast, who you called this morning, what you said to them. I know things you don't remember telling anyone. Because in this city, information flows like water, and I own every pipe. Bumpy pulled an envelope from his inside pocket, laid it on the table between them. That's your debt to Chicago. I bought it. Paid them $250,000. Good money. Now you don't owe Chicago anymore, Frank. You owe me. Costello opened the envelope with shaking hands, saw the transfer papers, saw the signatures. His debt bought and paid for like he was some small-time nobody. You son of a... Careful with your words. I'm not finished. Bumpy leaned back in his chair, comfortable, like they were discussing the weather. I also know where your next shipment is landing. I know the names of your contacts in Marseille. I know which cops you pay and how much. I know which judge signs your fake warrants. One phone call from me, Frank, and you don't just lose money. You lose your freedom. You spend whatever time you have left in a federal prison. Is that clear enough for you? Costello swallowed. His throat was dry as sand. What do you want? An agreement. The word hung in the air. Agreement. Such a simple word. But both men understood that simple words in this business carried the weight of lives. You and the 5 families leave Harlem alone. Completely. Permanently. No soldiers, no intimidation, no business of any kind. Harlem becomes a place that doesn't exist on your map. You pretend we're invisible. In exchange, I pay your debt to Chicago. $200,000. Clean money. Nobody needs to know you were ever in trouble. Costello laughed. It was a bitter sound, like broken glass scraping concrete. And the heroin? The $500,000 I lost? Who pays for that? That's your problem. Should have had better security. Costello leaned forward. His voice dropped to a whisper. Dangerous. And what if I refuse? What if I just have my men kill you right now? Bumpy's smile was colder than anything Costello had ever seen. Then those rifles fire. You die, your bodyguards die. Chicago hires someone to collect the debt from your family. DA gets a complete file on your operations. And Harlem declares total war on the 5 families. Every street corner, every night, forever. My people know where your soldiers sleep, where your children go to school, where your wives shop for groceries. You want that war, Frank? Because I promise you, I absolutely promise you, you will lose. The silence stretched. Costello looked at his bodyguards outside, thought about his 20 soldiers scattered around New York, thought about the thousands of eyes Bumpy had in Harlem, every window, every doorway, every street corner. The man was right. In Harlem, Bumpy Johnson didn't just have power. He had something more dangerous. He had love. The kind of love that makes people willing to die for you. Costello had fear and money, but fear fades. Money runs out. Love is forever. How long do I have to decide? Costello asked. You're deciding now. Yes or no. That's it. Costello looked into Bumpy's eyes, saw something there that terrified him more than any weapon. Absolute certainty. This man knew he was going to win. Had known it before he even sat down. Maybe had known it for months. I need to consult with the families. No, you decide. Right now. That's how this works. Costello thought about his options. If he agreed, he looked weak. If he refused, he might lose everything. But there was a third option. He could lie. Agree now, pay later. Then, when Bumpy came to collect, have 20 men waiting. Problem solved. The other families never needed to know about any of this. All right, Costello said slowly. Harlem stays independent. We leave you alone. Bumpy extended his hand across the table. Costello shook it. The hand was strong, calloused. the hand of someone who'd worked for everything he had. When do I get the 200,000? When I see action. 2 weeks. I want every Italian soldier out of Harlem. Every threat stopped. Every intimidation ended. Then you get your money. Bumpy stood to leave. Got 3 steps toward the door, stopped, turned back. One more thing, Frank, that photo of my granddaughter. If I ever find out who took it, if I ever discover who approved it, there's no agreement in the world that protects that person. We clear? Costello nodded. Bumpy walked out. The door closed, and Frank Costello sat there in the silence, sweat running down his back, realizing that he'd just been completely dominated by a man he'd thought of as beneath him. But he was already planning, already scheming. Because men like Frank Costello don't stay defeated, they adapt, they plot, they wait for their moment, and Costello's moment was coming. 2 weeks later, Harlem was clean. Italian soldiers withdrew. The grocery stores stopped getting robbed. The old ladies walked to church without fear. The kids played in the streets again. Costello hated every second of it, hated the humiliation, hated the whispers among his men. But he did it because he had a plan. And that plan required patience. He called Bumpy, kept his voice neutral, professional. It's done. Harlem is yours. Where's my money? Meet me at the Copacabana Club. Friday night, 10:30. Bring the receipt from Chicago. March 15th, 1961. The night of payment. Costello was confident for the first time in months. He had 20 armed men in the club, guns hidden everywhere, under tables, behind the bar, in coat check. He'd planned everything down to the minute. Bumpy would walk in, hand over the money, try to walk out, and never make it to the door. One problem solved, debt paid, respect restored. The other families wouldn't even need to know about the agreement. It would just look like Bumpy Johnson got too arrogant and paid the price. Perfect. The door opened. Bumpy walked in, alone. No backup visible, no weapons showing. Just a man in an expensive suit walking into a den of wolves. Costello smiled. Pure poison. Did you bring the money, boy? I came to collect the $100,000 from our agreement. Costello blinked, confused. Collect? You're supposed to pay me $200,000. No, you're paying me $100,000. The laughter exploded. Costello doubled over. His men joined in. The whole club filled with the sound of Italian amusement. This was too good, better than the plan. The man was insane, completely insane. You lost your mind? Costello gasped between laughs. You walk into my club, surrounded by my men, and demand money? Tony, Marco, grab this fool. 2 men moved forward, big men. Men who'd broken bones for fun, but Bumpy didn't move. His right hand slid into his inside pocket. Slow, deliberate. I wouldn't do that, he said softly. The hand came out. But it wasn't holding a gun, it was holding a knife. An old knife, Italian-made. The handle was mother of pearl, yellowed with age. Intricate patterns carved into it. Beautiful work. The kind of knife that meant something. The kind of knife you didn't just buy. The kind of knife you inherited. And Frank Costello recognized it immediately, because it was his father's knife. The knife Giuseppe Costello had carried from Sicily. The knife he'd used to kill his first man in 1925. The knife Frank kept in a secret safe in his brownstone. The knife nobody knew about except family. The laughter died. Completely. Instantly. Like someone had cut the sound with that very knife. Costello's face went white, then gray. His mouth opened, but no words came out. Bumpy Johnson twirled the knife between his fingers. Casual, like he was playing with a toy. How did you... Costello couldn't finish the sentence. I was in your house 3 weeks ago, Frank. While you were having dinner with the families at Bamboo Lounge, I walked in through the kitchen, disabled your alarm, opened your safe, the one behind the painting of the Roman Colosseum, took this knife, left a photo of Ruth in its place. You checked that safe, Frank, since then, or did you assume nobody could ever get in? Costello's hands were shaking, actually shaking. Something they'd never done before, not in 40 years of crime. If I can get into your house, Bumpy continued, voice low and deadly. If I can open your safe without you knowing, if I can take your father's knife and you don't even notice for 3 weeks, what else can I do? Where else have I been? What else do I know? Your bodyguards don't protect you, Frank. Your locks don't protect you. Your walls don't protect you. Nothing protects you from me. Costello looked around at his 20 men. All of them suddenly seemed useless, decorative, like props in a play that Bumpy was directing. "The 100,000, Bumpy said. You saved that money by not paying my informants. The ones you tried to bribe in Harlem. The ones who told you no and then told me yes. I paid them from my own pocket. Now you're reimbursing me, plus another 100,000 for the knife. Call it a sentimental value tax. And if I refuse?" Costello's voice cracked. He hated himself for it. Bumpy placed the knife on the table, gently, like it was precious, which it was. "Then keep it. But tomorrow morning all 5 families get a complete file. How you lost $700,000. How you made a secret deal with me. How you owe a black man from Harlem money and respect. How long do you think you stay alive after that, Frank? How long before Carlo Gambino decides someone else should run your family?" Costello knew. He was beaten. Completely. Totally. Bumpy Johnson hadn't just won, he'd humiliated him. Walked into his club, surrounded by his men, proved he could kill him any time he wanted, and there was nothing Costello could do about it. Nothing except accept it and try to salvage whatever dignity remained. "Tony," he said through clenched teeth, "get 200,000 from the upstairs safe." Tony hesitated. "Boss, now!" 5 minutes later, Tony returned with 2 leather bags. Bumpy opened them, counted quickly. Professional. 200,000. Exact. He closed the bags, stood up. "Pleasure doing business, Frank." Started toward the door. Got 5 steps. Costello's voice stopped him, raw, hateful. "One day, Bumpy, one day you're going to slip, and when you do, I'll be waiting." Bumpy stopped, turned around. His smile wasn't friendly, wasn't warm. It was the smile of someone who'd seen hell and walked out laughing. "Frank, I've already slipped 12 times, shot 6 times, stabbed twice, arrested 3 times, betrayed once, and I'm still here, still standing, still winning. You've never slipped, because you've always had a safety net, family money, connections, power handed to you. I took all that away in 6 months, so no, you'll never catch me. Because when I slip, I get back up. When you slip, you shatter." Bumpy Johnson walked out of the Copacabana Club carrying $200,000, alone. Just like he'd entered, 300 Italian eyes watched in complete silence. Nobody moved, nobody breathed, nobody dared. Frank Costello sat at his table, his father's knife in front of him, a permanent reminder. In Harlem, there was a king, and he wasn't Italian. The story spread through the underworld in hours, through the streets in days, through legend in weeks, and the 5 families never touched Harlem again. Not in Bumpy Johnson's lifetime, not in anyone's lifetime who remembered that night. Because some lessons are taught once, and only a fool needs to learn them twice. If you enjoyed our content, consider clicking the button. New exclusive stories every day.